Yate bene, or actually yate, my relatives. It's not morning here anymore in DC. It's about 1:20, I think, but I'm sitting down to share my second cup of coffee with you, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the anniversary yesterday of it was the first anniversary of the white Christian nationalism terrorist attack on the U.S. Capitol. But before we begin, I want to do as I always do, which is to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from what's now known as Washington, D.C., and that these are the traditional lands of the Piscataway. And I want to honor the Piscataway as the host people of these lands. I want to thank them for their stewardship of these lands. And I want to just state how humble I am to be living on these lands today. You notice at the beginning of this live stream, I shared this photo with you. I'm going to put it back on the screen one more time very quickly. This was the sunrise this morning. We've been having overcast skies for the past week and a half, and had a pretty major snowstorm a few days ago. And this morning was the first morning I was able to go out and actually watch the sunrise over the Potomac River. It was the first time in 2022. So I was very excited to go. It snowed last night, but it didn't snow very much, and they did a pretty good job of icing the roads here over the night, and so the roads weren't icy at all, or not icing the roads, of salting the roads. So the roads weren't icy at all this morning, and I was able to get down to the Potomac and was greeted with this incredible sunrise. I also streamed it on my Facebook account. If you'd like to watch it there, you can see it there. But I just wanted to share that with you. For a moment here. One of the things I wanted to discuss today is, the thing I wanted to discuss today is the fact that yesterday was the first anniversary of the white Christian nationalism terrorist attack on the U.S. Capitol. And it was commemorated in a lot of different ways. There were many things going on here in D.C., especially on the Mall. President Biden and Vice President Harris spoke at the Capitol, and they commemorated this day. There was other ceremonies going on, a moment of silence held by members of Congress. And there were a lot of things on television. There was a lot of discussion around the country about that. It was the 1-year anniversary of this terrorist attack. And I wanted to just discuss a little bit about that this morning. So let me get into that a little bit. Before I do, let me see who's on here with us. Catherine, thanks for joining. Sue, thank you for joining. Eva, it's great to have you. I want to thank everybody for joining me on my second cup of coffee today. I actually have been drinking one of my local cups of coffee here. It's from a local roastery named Harar here in DC, and they're one of my favorite roasteries, about 10 minutes away from me. So I have to drive there, maybe 15 minutes away. So I have to drive there to pick them up. But I was able to get some beans there yesterday and have been enjoying some good Ethiopian coffee here at the house. So that's what I'm drinking today. Stephen and Sue, great to have you here. Thanks for joining. I'm grateful for all of you to join me today. So if you follow me on social media, you'll know that yesterday on most of my social media accounts, I put up this post where I said, I lament that white Christian nationalism terrorists are not treated as terrorists. And that post got a lot of engagement. It got a lot of response from people, and there were a few people responding regarding the language that I was using, calling it white Christian nationalism terrorism. And I've been fairly intentional to use that term over the past year, because identifying what happened on January 6th here at the US Capitol, not only as terrorism, but as white nationalism terrorism, is vitally important for us to do. And I'm convinced that because we don't identify it as terrorism is one of the reasons why we had such a poor response to it, especially from our police departments and even our government, and why we are not responding to it well as a nation today. And so I want to talk a little bit about that. And you know that for at least you know that for white America, using the word terrorists in reference to white people is incredibly triggering. If you don't believe me, I invite you to go online and watch the interaction that Ted Cruz and Tucker Carlson had yesterday, because Ted Cruz actually referred to what happened on January 6th as terrorism, and Tucker Carlson wouldn't have any of that. And so when Ted Cruz was on his show yesterday, there was a heated exchange going back and forth, and Ted Cruz walked back his comments. And did not have the courage or the boldness to stand behind what he believes, and instead walked it back so that he could appeal to his user base. And again, this just identifies Ted Cruz is not a man of conviction, right? He's not a man who says what he believes. He's a man who says things to make people like him or agree with him. And so he lacked the courage to stand up not only to Tucker Carlson, but to other people who would disagree with him. And he didn't have the courage to actually identify this as terrorism. If you don't believe me, I'm just going to share this link in the comment section right now. It was an article posted on Politico about that interaction and about Ted Cruz walking back his comments. But I want to talk for a little bit about why I'm so intentional to call this white Christian nationalist terrorism. And as I was doing some research to kind of share some of these thoughts with you today, I found a very interesting article. I don't actually use this in the points I'm making, but it's an article put out by USA Today, and it's the people arrested on January 6th, or out of the fallout of January 6th. And it's a very long page. It takes a little bit moments to load, especially if it's on your phone. But it just gives you a profile of the people arrested. And I believe now there are almost 700 people, maybe even over 700 people arrested on this out of this terrorist attack. They're calling it, USA Today is calling it riot arrests. A lot of people, kind of the more accepted term is insurrectionists, but very few people are actually sticking to calling it terrorism, and especially they're not calling it frequently white nationalism terrorism. And so as I was looking for, one of the first things I want to demonstrate to you is, there's this term white Christian nationalist terrorists. Let's talk about the whiteness, right? White. Can we really identify the people who were involved in this attack as white? And there were a few articles I wanted to share with you. One is from the Washington Post. This was last April, and it references that at that point, 377 people had been arrested, and 95% of those people were white, and 85% of the people were male. This past month, there was another article in a website called Foreign Policy, and they were looking at other research. This article was published this month, and they identified that 93% of those arrested were white, and 86% of those arrested were male. Now, both of these articles reference some research done by the University of Chicago called the Project on Security and Threats. CPOST is the name of this research group. I'm going to put a link to their website here. And they've been looking at reports that CPOST has been putting out over the past year as they have been following and tracking the people arrested after the January 6th attacks in 2021. And so I'm actually going to give a link to that post right here. And this is a PowerPoint presentation, our PowerPoint file. It's a PDF actually put out by CPOST from their most recent data collection, at least that's listed on their website, which was from July 2nd of 2021, so last summer. And at that point, and I'm actually going to share my screen here so you can see this. Let me put this up here. So yeah, so this is the file by CPOST, and you can see this is the Chicago Project on Security and Threats, and this is the right-wing organization evolving into a violent mass movement. And you can see all their slides down here. I'm going to scroll down. So if we go down to slide, I think it's slide 5, it shows us that as of July 2nd, 2021, they had 532 arrests that they were analyzing. Then if we go down to their slide on number 8, it shows us that of those arrested on the Capitol Hill violence, 93% of those people were white and 86% of those people were male. Now, what's even more interesting, if we scroll down here, we will see that of those arrested, 86% of those people were employed, 7% were unemployed. And of the people who were employed, 19% were business owners and 29% were white collar workers. What they're trying to do is draw this picture of the people who were attacking the Capitol are not your normal marginalized community that you think would be up in arms about something. This was a very more highly educated, definitely better employed, and essentially this was white landowning men who were at the Capitol building that day. And that's according to the research by the University of Chicago, CPOST right there. So I wanted to share that with you there. So we can definitely conclude, yes, this terrorist attack was done by white people. Now, how about Christian nationalism? Well, if you follow me, if you've read my book, Unselling Truth, you know that I have built a very long argument about the violence coming out of Christian nationalism that's rooted in the doctrine of discovery. It's expressed through the notion of American exceptionalism, and that's rooted in the lie of white supremacy. And you've heard my discussion about these many, many, many times. But I wanted to get some other research of other people who are talking about this. And so I found this article by Time. It was by Time magazine. And I'm going to put this in the comments right now. And this article was titled January 6th may have been only the first wave of Christian nationalist violence. And I want to read just the first 3 paragraphs from this article. It says, a year after the horrifying violence at the Capitol on January 6, 2021, a simple partisan storyline crowds out a central driver behind the events. Most media are understandably tracking the January 6th committee and Trump's Republican accomplices, and many pollsters have focused on the growing partisan divide regarding Trump's role in the events or whether rioters should be prosecuted. Largely forgotten, unless we look back at countless photos and footage of the violence, are the Christian banners and flags, the wooden crosses, the impromptu praise and worship sessions, the Jesus Save signs, the Christian t-shirts, and the infamous corporate prayer in Jesus' name in the Senate chamber. Having stormed the sanctum of American democracy, the QAnon shaman thank God for filling this chamber with patriots that love you and that love Christ, allowing them to send a message to their enemies that this is our nation, not theirs. The article goes on to say we are forgetting that January 6th was very much a religious event. White Christian nationalism on display. We must remember that fact because evidence is mounting that white Christian nationalism could provide the theological cover for more events like this. And so we have to just acknowledge, right, what happened by the admission of the people who were committing these acts is they were doing this in the name of their faith, and they were doing this out of a belief that this country was theirs and that they have the right to make this a Christian nation. This was absolutely white Christian nationalism on display. There was another article in the media Salon. I'm going to share that here. I'm not going to talk much about it, but you're welcome to go in and look at that. So, yes, not only was these terrorists white, they were absolutely doing this in the name of Christian nationalism. So then the final piece of this is, can we really call this terrorism? Is this literally terrorism? Terrorism is commonly defined as the unlawful use of violence and intimidation in the pursuit of political aims. It's a simple definition of terrorism. If you Google it or search it, you'll probably come across a very similar definition online. But again, that's not a common definition. It is a little harder to go by. So I actually went to the FBI's website and I found a sheet that they have published of common definitions of terms and ideas. And I looked up their definition of domestic terrorism. I'm going to once again share my screen because I want to go in and actually show you this PDF that they have on their website. This is indeed FBI.gov, and this is the document with their domestic terrorism definitions, terminology, and methodology. The definition, domestic terrorism, is for the purpose, for the FBI's purpose, is referenced in U.S. Code at 18 U.S.C. 23315, and is defined as activities involving acts dangerous to human life that are a violation of the criminal laws of the United States or of any state. Second, appearing to be intended to, 1, intimidate or coerce the civilian population, 2, influence the policy of government by intimidation or coercion, and 3, affect the conduct of a government by mass destruction, assimilation, or kidnapping, or assassination, or kidnapping, and 4, occurring primarily within the territorial jurisdiction of the United States. That is how the FBI defines domestic terrorism. The people at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th were white, largely, were absolutely Christian nationalists, and they were there to overturn the will of the people and to have Donald Trump certified as the winner of the election, even though he did not win either the popular vote or the Electoral College vote. They were also there with gallows to hang Vice President Pence, and they were there to intimidate, cause fear, and even hurt the Congress members who were trying to verify this election. And so by this definition, what they were doing was absolutely terrorism. So there can be no doubt January 6th was white Christian nationalism terrorists. That's what it was. There's nothing to debate here. It was absolutely a terrorist attack. Now, there's a lot of studies going on, and people are saying, well, how come our police department, the Capitol Police, didn't respond in time? How come the U.S. government dropped the ball and didn't respond in time? And let me tell you why. And this is why we have to identify this as white Christian nationalism terrorism. The reason the Capitol Police did not respond quickly, the reason they were not prepared, is not because there was a lack of communication. It's not because they didn't know there were threats. It's not because they were not aware of what was happening. It's because it was being instigated by white people. And white people are not seen as terrorists. I promise you, had that group been of the Muslim faith, had that group been African American or Native or some other marginalized group of color, I promise you, there would have not only been a barricade of soldiers and police force there, but there would have been probably tanks and other ammunition and guns there. Think about Standing Rock. Think about how President Trump cleared the space in front of the Capitol and the White House just a few days earlier, or a few weeks earlier. Right? When this nation feels threatened by people of color or by people from other faiths beyond Christianity, they are absolutely ready, armed, and ready to defend themselves at a moment's notice. The problem was not a lack of communication. The problem was not internal processes. The problem was our society, our institutions do not see white people as threats. That's the problem. I promise you, if the people there were 93% people of color, 93% people from other faiths, the response would have been massive, and the bloodshed would have been through the roof by our police departments and as they defended the Capitol. But because it was white people coming, they didn't take it seriously. They didn't see white people as threats. This is the problem. And so yesterday, when both Joe Biden and Vice President Harris spoke at the U.S. Capitol, I actually gave, I'll give you, here is some links to their remarks. They spoke at the U.S. Capitol. This first one here is a transcription of President Biden's remarks. And the second one is a video on the White House YouTube channel of their remarks. And I welcome you to, if you didn't have a chance to listen to it or read it, I welcome you to do that. I didn't see it live, but I did watch it just a few, like within an hour after it happened yesterday. And I actually tweeted out some of my responses. I kind of did this throughout the day. So I'm going to share this on here as well. I put this on my Twitter account. I just started kind of a thread that I said would have my response throughout the day. But one of my first reflections was I couldn't help but notice that they didn't use the word terrorists or terrorism, right? They did not identify what happened or who the people were as committing acts of terror or as being terrorists. They didn't use those words. Second, and if you listen to the remarks, again, both by Vice President Harris as well as by President Biden, the primary theme of their speeches was we the people, right? It was we the people, the will of the people. We are a nation of the people, we the people. And they didn't address the fact that we the people, to this day, is defined as white landowning men. The very people who committed these acts of terror. We the people in the United States of America does not mean all the people. It doesn't mean Native Americans. It doesn't mean Black Americans. It doesn't mean women. If you don't believe me, read the Constitution. Just read it. You will find out very quickly, Article 1, Section 2, that those groups are not included. So they had this theme. Again, their theme was calling out Donald Trump. They were calling out the GOP. They weren't actually getting to the heart of the problem. And that was one of the things I stated this was maybe the fourth or fifth tweet I did yesterday. I said the real crisis our nation is facing is not simply the individual partisan problem that Donald Trump and the GOP don't want to give up power. The real problem we're facing is the systemic, bipartisan problem that white landowning men don't want to give up power. That's the real problem. But that's not the problem we're talking about. So we're blaming this on Donald Trump. Is he at fault? Absolutely. Is he the root of the problem? Not even close. Same with the GOP. Again, the two-party system works to maintain the status quo, and the status quo is based on the lie of white supremacy and rooted in the doctrine of discovery. And so the fact that people were not willing to have the deeper conversation, the fact that our leaders cannot call what happened on January 6, 2021 terrorism, and they can't directly call out white Christian nationalism for what it is, terrorism, means we're not going to solve this problem. At least not this way. Right? Joe Biden's not going to solve this problem. Because believe it or not, Donald Trump is not the problem. He's an instigator of the problem. He exacerbates the problem. He's not the root of the problem. The root of the problem is the doctrine of discovery. The root of the problem is white Christian nationalism. The root of the problem is the lie of white supremacy. The root of the problem is the myth of American exceptionalism. That's the root of the problem. And no one from either party wants to talk about that, which is why both President Biden and Vice President Harris referenced and implied frequently throughout their speeches American exceptionalism. So much it made me I almost wanted to turn away because they were so heavy on reaffirming their myth of their own exceptionalism, of American exceptionalism. So anyway, this is where I feel like as a nation, we have to learn how to talk about these things. Joe Biden was, and he even said, one of the quotes he's being repeated frequently after his speech yesterday is that we have to face our problems. And it's not just, you have to love this country not only when you win. And again, he can say that when he's talking about this as an individual partisan problem. But when you look at it as a systemic white supremacy, racism, sexism problem, again, I'm not convinced he would be on that side. People might say, oh wait, but he was vice president to President Obama. Yes, he was. And if you watch President Obama's 8 years in office, he started out talking boldly about ideas for change. And he left the office 8 years later, espousing the myth of American exceptionalism better than any other white president I've heard. I'm pretty convinced Joe Biden was there to help guide him to not step too heavily on the toes of white landowning men. Anyway, I won't get into all of that right now, but this is the challenge we face as a nation, my relatives. And this is where we have to stop seeing our problems as individual and partisan problems. They're not. They are systemic problems. They're rooted, they're embedded into our institutions. And if we don't fix it there, we are not going to solve these problems. I tweeted yesterday, and this was about my book. I put this out into my social media, and I said, white Christian nationalism, nationalist terrorism is not exclusive to January 6th. Its roots are embedded in the US Constitution and its justification found in the doctrine of discovery. I'm sharing that right there. I'm continuing to push our nation to discuss the content of this book. I am so convinced that the things my co-author and I, Soong-Chan Rah, and I discuss in these books are so central to the challenges we face as a nation. And they're so clearly the things our nation does not want to have conversation about. So even though this book was published 2 years ago, I'm using this year, 2022, as a year to break it out of kind of my own platform bubble and to bring it much more nationally. We have to find a way to discuss these things. We have to find a way to look at the doctrine of discovery and the roots of our systemic and implicit racism, sexism, and white supremacy. So I'm continuing to push this out. I was grateful I got a pretty good response to it on social media. I'm very grateful for a lot of people have been sharing with me ways they've seen my book being used, our book being used to engage this conversation. Please continue to share those with me. I'm very grateful for the things that are happening and the things that are beginning to take place, but we have a lot of work to do, my relatives. We have a lot of work to do. And yesterday, the first anniversary of the white Christian nationalism terrorist attack on our US Capitol was evidence of the very, very, very long road we have ahead of us. But we can get there. I absolutely believe we can. I believe we can make these changes. Anyway, thank you for joining me. Thank you for being on this live stream with me. I know there's a bunch of people. Let me look through the comments to see who's here. Jack Merzig, group study guide. I've actually had a thought about that. On my website, at the same link for the book I just shared, there is a group. There is a series of videos, 14 videos of when I did an online virtual study of the book. And I'm in the process of putting some things together that I'm going to be doing next year or this year, to kind of reorganize what I'm doing and where I'm presenting stuff and how I'm presenting stuff. So as Omicron is definitely changing things going into 2022, as I've already have had a few speaking events both either postponed or maybe even canceled because of this new surge in the virus. So I'm thinking, what do I need to do to continue to find ways to engage this? Maybe not in person, but how can we do this even more effective virtually? So thank you for that suggestion, Jack. I'm definitely thinking about this. Miles Flagg, I'm sharing this with the Canadian Association of the Club of Rome, who are having a related speaker next Wednesday. Thank you for sharing that. I want to thank everybody who's been on this with me. Debbie Moore, thanks for being here. I'm looking through the list. There's a lot of people commenting. I want to thank everyone for being here today. I don't think I'm going to be doing much over the weekend, but I will be doing some second cups of coffee early next week. And I plan to make some announcements of some changes I'm going to be making to my social media so that I can continue to engage with this, and to try to even deepen the conversation moving forward, as well as ways that I can continue to support myself and to make sure that I'm able to continue doing this work moving forward. So yeah, my relatives, thank you for joining me today. Thank you so much for sitting down and having your second cup of coffee with me. It is supposed to be clear tomorrow morning, and so I am planning to go and watch the sunrise, and I hope to post it on my social and do the live stream as I normally do. But thank you for joining me. Walk in beauty, my relatives. and may we learn how to walk in beauty together. Hakone.